Welcome to the Third Apron podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sam Quinn. I think it was a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, we did a podcast about my blow it up rankings. And we intended the next day, I think, to do a follow up podcast to that based on a little side project of mine that I was working on as I was doing the blow it up rankings. I think we got sidetracked. I want to say LaMelo Ball happened right afterward, and then just real life happened, blah, blah, blah. But now we're circling back to that side project, which I did write about for TBS exercise that I came up with in the midst of blowing up all of these teams. The team that, if they would blow it up, would have the most to gain would be Oklahoma City. And I don't mean that they should. They obviously shouldn't. But hypothetically, let's say a rival GM got his hands on a genie's lamp and wished for the Thunder to blow it up to make it easier for them to win a championship. How much value could they really get? How many first round picks could the Thunder get if they traded everybody? So I did the math and I came up with a number. I'm going to walk you through my math as we go. Yossi, this is familiar with something that you've written a few times, right?
Yeah, when I was with Hoops Hype, I had a project where I had to, what I called it, came up with a team's net value based on everything that they have on the roster and their draft picks in total. So the total value of their players and whatever draft picks that they had coming. Now, the methodology wasn't that sound. A lot of it was just kind of like the sum of everything. I didn't really get into valuing what these first round picks are worth that you might have from another team like you do. But I kind of figured out, kind of roughly what a player's worth, even if that player probably might not fetch that type of return right now. It's just kind of a lot of it was also based on the market. So, like when I started a couple of years ago, the best players were going for 4 first round picks at the time. So that was like a good most teams' net value was inflated then. Now, especially last year, now this year, those returns aren't really out there. So most teams would probably see a lower value. I would want to come up with an actual metric one day to actually try to figure out how much a team is worth, because it's one thing to rank the teams, but as we go through this, there should be, if we're going to rank these teams based on the value of everything that they've got, it would be good to have like an actual metric to show just how much more value the Thunder have over every other team, because there'd be a significant gulf between them and then whoever is number two. I'm not sure who is number two. I haven't gone through this exercise right now, but I think that yeah. So I have some familiarity with this exercise, and I think it's definitely worth seeing what like the total is for OKC, because this is probably their players that they have, and the combination of all the extra draft picks, probably the wealthiest team in any given moment in NBA history.
So what I was going to ask you was, what was the highest net value that you ever found a team had? Because we'll see, I assume, what I came up with for Oklahoma City this year is higher than whatever that number was. Like, roughly, what was the highest you ever found?
I don't remember what the numbers were, but I what I could say is that in the past it was like 23 and 24 when I did these, or maybe 22 and 23. OKC I'm pretty sure was number one both years. I'd have to go back and check. And this is before most of the players that they have now came into their own, and they had a lot more draft picks. Now they don't have quite as many. They still have like now it's the surplus is shrinking. They've only got an extra pick through like 28, or I mean 29.
So right
Uh,
now, actually, I have this in front of me. The most they can have over the next 8 drafts is 14 first round picks, which is a surplus of 6. But they're not going to get all of those picks because some of them have protections that mean they either won't convey, or a lot of them are swaps, or like the best of or the second best of, or blah, blah, blah. So I imagine, without digging too deep, they'll end up with 11 or 12 out of those 14 in the next 8 years. So that's still a pretty sizable surplus for a normal team. It is not compared to where they were in the past, but they've used most of that surplus, right? Like, they've drafted players with those picks, and now they have a budding dynasty. So that's what happens when you have a surplus.
Right. So yeah, you wrote about this last week and put it out. So so lead me to this. How should we go about this?
So what I want to do is let's just go through how I did this exercise, and B, we'll go through all of the trades, and you can tell me, is this trade ridiculous? Is this too much? Is this not enough? Like, basically, I want you to audit my process here and tell me if I landed in a reasonable place. So the way that I did this, there were a couple of rules that I operated by. Number one, these trades are taking place in the offseason of 2026. The reason for that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not currently tradable, and Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, having just signed rookie extensions, have poison pills, which means they're both very complicated to trade. It was just simpler to trade everybody based on their 2026 numbers, because even if some of these guys might not be back, like, Hartenstein is a team option, Dort is a team option, they have the option to bring all of them back, so they are all tradable to the Thunder. So we're operating from the 2026 offseason, which means we have draft picks between 2026 and 2033, not 2032,
Yeah.
to operate with as chips here. The goal of this exercise is to acquire as many first round picks as possible. So there are going to be cases where, like, you might argue, hey, the Thunder might rather have this player from this team as opposed to this pick. We're trying to liquidate here, so we're not really going to get into the weeds on this, but these are real trades that have to work from a salary perspective, which means the Thunder will be taking players back, and if they do, they are then free to retrade those players for more picks, which I did. I only did in one case, but I think it was pretty notable. I also took out Nikola Topic and Thomas Sorber because they have not played an NBA game yet. I don't think it's reasonable for us to assume their value, and plus a team blowing it up would keep those guys. So everybody else is in play. I think that I found, of the 15 players on Oklahoma City's roster, you take out Topic and Sorber, 3 players, I think it was Usman Jang, Big Jalen Williams, and Kenrich Williams, wouldn't net first round picks, so they weren't really worth going into. Like, you'd get seconds for them, sure, but I didn't bother with that. The other 10 players did have at least a valuation in my mind of 1 first round pick. So let's go through all these trades. Tell me if I'm reasonable, and then we'll get to the end and we'll be able to cover just how much net value they've gained out of this and how much they have with their own picks included. So the beginning of this, the way we're going to start, is trading away the superstars, which means we're starting with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the reigning MVP. The belief I went into this with was that the Thunder could trade SGA for any collection of draft picks in the entire NBA. I don't think there is a single team that would say, you cannot have this pick for SGA. He's that young. He's that good. He's pretty low maintenance, right? Like, he's happy in Oklahoma. I don't think there's a market where he would say, like, oh, no, I can't play here. I just said any draft pick in the NBA is seemingly in play. So the question that I asked myself was, which team has the best collection of draft picks besides Oklahoma City? And the answer to me was pretty easy. I think you'll agree. It's Houston. Do you agree with that?
I think so. I haven't looked too deeply into it. I know there's also Brooklyn and Utah, but when you're looking at because when you're looking at the actually attainable first round picks, Brooklyn's not going to trade their own first. Those are the more valuable than what they have. Utah, they're not going to trade their own first. Now San Antonio, they had a surplus. It's kind of down now. So I think, like, yeah, Houston does have the most valuable draft picks out there that could actually be traded. So yeah, that would make sense. I can't really think, like, you've got other teams like the Sixers. Okay, they have like 1 valuable first round pick. It's
The
probably
Rockets
not
have a
quite
lot.
enough. Yeah, so you want to detail what
Yes.
Houston's got?
So this would be a trade for 6 first round picks, and we'll get into the players afterward. The thing about Houston's picks is that they're from other teams, so they're not as affected by having Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the roster. So the 6 first round picks that I will be trading as Houston are Phoenix's unprotected 2027, the better of Brooklyn and Houston's 2027. So frankly, Brooklyn's, the two best out of Dallas, Phoenix, and Houston in 2029, which could be at least one of those could be pretty good with Phoenix. Dallas, maybe not so much. Houston's would probably be bad. And then Houston, three. Then we have the matching salary to consider here. I think the easiest way to do this would be Fred VanVleet, who has that. I guess he would opt into his player option, presumably in this world. Clint Capella, not super valuable to Houston. They're happy to move him. And then the easiest way to fill out the money from there, Reed Shepard, who I think has demonstrated significant positive value since, coming into the rotation this year. I pegged him at being worth 2 first-round picks. The team that I traded him to was Dallas, a team that needs a young guard, and I had them Dallas sending their 2031 and 2033 picks. So for this entire SGA exercise, the Thunder have gained 8 first-round picks. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Eight first round picks of value between the first round picks and the players are bringing. Yes.
Right, because they're trading Reed Shepard for 2 more.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of in line with what OKC initially got for Paul George when you're considering they got 5 first round picks, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who at the time probably maybe worth 2 first round picks. He still had a lot of potential. Like, people were really high on him. So I think if you were trading SGA at the time, you might be able to get like 2 pretty good first round picks for him, even after his rookie season with the Clippers, which really wasn't like that impressive. So ideally, it's going to be hard for another team to really match that out there, I think, without really getting their roster. I would imagine that Houston is one of the more well-equipped teams to do such a trade. So who were the players that you had sent out?
It was Fred VanVleet, Clint Capella, and Reed Shepard.
Fred, Capella, and
Reminder,
Shepard.
though, remember, SGA did sign that Supermax extension, but it doesn't kick in until the 27-28 season. So you're only having to match 40.8 million as opposed to a 35% max. So that's why those are the players involved.
So me just being the nerd that I am going to pull out a cap sheet with what the trade that you just did with Houston. So big, yeah. They could still sign Tyrese, and after they got plenty of second apron space to fill up the rest of the roster.
We're talking about the second apron for this roster. You could pay the GDP of a small nation in taxes with this team. You're winning like 3 or 4 championships.
I know the topic's not on Houston, but I just kind of want to see how it would look anyways. That is a monster top 5. I mean, with in there. Oof. Okay, anyways, enough on that. Yeah, I think that's appropriate value. That's kind of like, is the Paul George trade the most value received for one player? I think that's kind of like 8 first round picks worth of value.
Yeah, I think the only competition would maybe there are 2 that come to mind. KD to Phoenix comes to mind.
Yeah.
And the other one would be James Harden to Brooklyn. Because remember, it was 7 years worth of drafts, but Jared Allen also got traded for another first round pick. So it was kind of 8 first round draft assets, but half of them were swaps. Now, some of those swaps at the beginning weren't good, but obviously later on they turned out to be more meaningful.
Yeah.
So those 3, I think, are certainly where draft picks are concerned, the biggest returns any Stars have ever gotten. So I think we're in line with that, maybe slightly above it, and that makes sense to me because I think SGA right now is more valuable than Durant, Harden, and I'm spacing on and Paul George were at that moment. So for SGA to generate more trade value than any of them does make sense to me. So biggest trade in NBA history has already been made here in this podcast.
I would say the Kevin Durant trade to Phoenix is probably the most value ever received for a player because
of the players too.
Well, first of all, those picks they've already, like, the first one, that 23 pick wasn't anything special, but that 25 was already 10th overall. The 27, 29, I imagine, should also still be pretty high. And then they also got Mikal Bridges, who was traded later for 5 first-round picks.
5 first-round picks.
So when you're talking about, like, I think Mikal Bridges, he definitely increases value after his tenure with the Nets, even though I'm sure the Knicks didn't anticipate that like the numbers that he put up as something that would translate like 1-to-1 production wise with the Knicks. Cam Johnson also, when you because like his value, I think it also increased. So they get that first round pick plus Michael Porter Jr. Now, I obviously I don't know what they expected for Michael Porter Jr., but now he's playing so well that they should probably be able to get like an additional first round pick, maybe 2 for him. So we're talking about like 12 first round picks worth the value when it's all said and done, once that trade tree is completed. So that's the only thing I would that with this SGA trade, it wouldn't top that. Like even if Reed Shepard continues to pan out, he's not gonna. I don't really anticipate him being like 3 first round picks worth of value or more.
I had 2.
Yeah, but that's just the market now. Like I just
Yeah.
don't think you're one. I don't think teams are gonna be wanting are gonna like be as quite as reckless as teams were a couple of years ago. And then also now a lot of teams can't be that reckless because they've traded all their picks. So that the window to try to get even more value has passed, but that's still amazing value for him.
So I really quickly, the Reed Shepard trade that I came up with 2 first rounders from Dallas, 31 and 33. I think that's a steal of a trade for Dallas because Cooper Flag will be in his prime at that point. And you would effectively then be building around Flag, Derek Lively, who can protect the Reed Shepard so well defensively that you just get the offensive value, and then your own 26 first round pick, which you're still keeping. So I do think that's fair. I think Dallas gets a great trade there. But that was the team I looked at that said, oh, they would trade 2 first round picks for Reed.
I don't think Dallas would do that now. With their draft pick situation, it's a little too risky.
But you'd have
But I'm
so
sure.
many good young players already. You wouldn't need picks.
Well, they could. It's just that the both picks are playing. They'd be trading. It's like in the 2030s. It's a lot right now. Like I could see another team doing it, but I think Dallas just with the context of their situation, I don't see them quite doing it. But I think the value's fair. Like
Okay.
in a vacuum, that value is pretty fair.
All right. Enough with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. On to Jalen Williams. As we have learned lately, like I was having a conversation with another media person today where nobody wants to trade for guards. Nobody wants to trade for centers. People only want to trade for wings. Mikal Bridges gets 5 first round picks. So that's like the floor for Jalen Williams. He's obviously better, younger, and I guess he's not going to be cheaper at that point, but who cares? He's so good. You're happy to pay him the max. So the trade I came up with was who has the second most draft pick value to trade, and that was Brooklyn. And the valuation I set was 6 first round picks. That would be Brooklyn's own in even numbered years, which would be 28, 2030, and 2032. And then the Knicks picks in odd years, which were 27, 29, and 31. Obviously, the thing that comes to mind here is that I did not say 2026, which is Brooklyn's own pick this year. That is obviously the most valuable pick that the Nets have. I think what the Nets would argue is that they would need that pick to build around with Williams, with the thought being we're going to have Jalen Williams, a top 5 pick this year, and a bunch of cap space, and we're going to build ourselves into a contender that way. And if we're sending you 6 first round picks, you're just going to have to be happy with that. So, do you think that's reasonable?
Yeah, it's reasonable. That's a lot of first round picks. But
It's not the crown jewel.
Yeah, no, I think when you're looking at everything going on, you got Houston trading for SGA. Who's the next best package? Next best team that can make the best package? It's definitely Brooklyn at that point. With those extra picks, we discussed this. I think those Knicks picks could potentially be valuable in the later end because this Knicks team, realistically, their run I think is like through 2027. After that, who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure some of the guys will get moved by then. Maybe they want to save some money. Maybe some guys start to decline. So I think those could be good. Now if those who know we should say this. What are we expecting the Nets to be then in 2030 if they're getting Jalen Williams? Do you think by then you're pretty confident? And especially knowing that they wouldn't have their swap in 2020, their pick in 2027. Funnily enough, now with that Houston trade, then OKC would have it. Uh, you think those 2030? I feel like those Knicks picks in the later years would then be more valuable in this scenario than those Nets ones.
Yeah, that was sort of the idea. I think the most valuable pick the Nets have is their own 26, which they're keeping. But then the Knicks picks are the real prizes here because those own picks for Brooklyn, they have Jalen Williams, who's very young. They have all of the guys they drafted last year, and they have their own 26 pick, which is going to be in the top five, probably going to be pretty good. And they don't have any other. I guess they still have Porter, but that's a pretty short contract. And they have Claxton, who is a declining contract. They'll be able to generate cap space before those rookies and the 26 pick become expensive. So they'll be able to have cap space, whether it's in 28 or 29 or something. And they'll be in New York, so they'll be able to recruit well. So I am pretty confident that this version of the Nets would build into a contender at some point in the relatively near future. So those Nets picks, not great. The Knicks picks are really the prize here.
Okay. I think it's still a good value either way. I like it.
Next one, Chet Holmgren. There were two teams that I was really interested in here. We've talked about them a lot as far as these are the two teams that we see likeliest to trade for a big name center. The first was Indiana, and I thought there was a very interesting trade where the Pacers would send their 26th pick, which they're right like might be number one. It's going to be one of the top picks, and Pascal Siakam, and then they would flip Siakam to another team for more picks. I ultimately just it's weird to apply realism to an exercise like this. The Pacers are just too conservative an organization to do that.
I was just thinking about the 2022 draft and some because like around 22 23 teams weren't really bottoming out as hard as some of the years before, and that's because of the play-in tournament and lottery reform. And I've been thinking about a lot of the teams that could have used Chet Holmgren, like Orlando's the big one. What if they selected Chet Holmgren instead of Paolo Banchero? I think they'd be a completely different team. But then I also thought about Indiana, who they had just traded Sabonis for Tyrese Halliburton. I don't remember what else they traded Brogdon later in that offseason. Like they were undergoing a retool, but they didn't bottom out as hard as they probably should have in those years. They ended up with the sixth pick, drafting Benedict Mathurin. Yeah. Oh my God. If they had Chet Holmgren, like not only is that exactly the type of center, like the supersized version of Miles Turner that they had on both ends of the court, but then they might have won the championship because then OKC wouldn't have had him. Like I don't know if OKC even makes the finals if they had drafted anyone else other than Chet.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at this moving forward, you'd have Halliburton, Chet, Nemhard, Neesmith. I guess Obi Toppin or Jarris Walker would be the power forward moving forward. Like you'd be either the favorite or co-favorite or something like that in the East moving forward. Again, it was just a dumb way to apply realism, perhaps, but I applied realism nonetheless. And I just thought the Pacers are not organizationally, they don't have the constitution to do something like this. So I went to the next team on the list of teams that would want to stretch center. And very conveniently, it was a team that has its own picks, which is the Chicago Bulls. So what I did was all of Chicago's own picks in odd numbered years, 27, 29, 31, and 33, plus that lottery protected pick that they have from Portland, which could convey this year 27 or 28. So I value Chet slightly below Jalen Williams at 5 first round picks. Part of that is just frankly at a certain point, you run out of teams that are capable of trading 6 first round picks. So you kind of do have to get a little bit pickier. So that was part of it. And then the other part of it was like, he's a center. Center's less valuable than wings. I think he's as valuable as centers get because of the shooting. But you also have the injury concerns, which I think are pretty real. So slightly less valuable than J-Dub, but ultimately still very, very valuable. I threw Patrick Williams in as partial matching salary. The Nets, by the way, we had no matching salary because the Nets just have cap space. So I didn't bother with matching salary there. For
Yeah.
the Bulls, they have cap space as well, but I wanted to send out a little bit because their cap space is a little bit more nebulous depending on if they're going to re-sign their own guys. So I threw in Patrick Williams. We've long since forgotten this. This may be a little bit of a not a black mark on Presti's resume, but just it's kind of funny when you look at it. In 2024, when Patrick Williams was a restricted free agent, and he re-signed with the Bulls, 5 years, 90 million. The hot rumor at the time was that the Thunder were going to give him an offer sheet, and that might have been the rare Sam Presti miss if that had happened, but it ultimately didn't. And what am I saying? If the Thunder got Patrick Williams, he would immediately turn into OG Anunoby, and whatever, he'd be great. So it's Patrick Williams and those 5 first-round picks for Chet. Fair, like it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Again, like with Chicago, you like with Indiana, ideally Indiana, their next center is a stretch big like Miles Turner. It's going to be very hard to get. But the Bulls are hoping for another stretch big, whoever that next big is, to try to replicate some of what Vooch does. And Chet would be the best possible version of that. So I think Chet's definitely worth an entire team draft right now, plus like another good player too. Like I would imagine the Thunder could probably also try to get a negotiation getting a guy like Buzelis out of it. I think I'm much higher on Chet's value. Uh, I I kind of I'm kind of thinking they're equal with Jalen Williams, but I think I'd give a slight edge to Chet. So like if Buzelis is worth like 2 first round picks, then yes, that's 7 first round, that's 6 first round picks worth of value, maybe another one.
Uzell's, I think, is worth multiple first, so that would be
So
more.
yeah,
I think it's just a matter of centers are easier to find than wings, and you need wings more than you need centers. So like it's not a commentary on the player so much as the trade market. Although I guess what you could argue is like I'm thinking Mikal Bridges as the benchmark for like this is why wings keep getting so much. But you could then turn around and say, well, Rudy Gobert got 5 first-round picks. So it's a fair argument.
yeah.
I don't know that Chicago would put in Buzelis just as an organizational matter. I think they're so proud of having drafted somebody that like could internally become maybe not a star, but like a fringy all-star type. I think is reasonable for Buzelis,
Yeah.
at least at this point, and we'll see where it goes. I think realistically, though, once Houston and Brooklyn are off the board, if OKC was trading Chet, we'd have to start taking player value more into account. And I didn't do that for this exercise. So you could argue that there are packages out there worth more. But those are the 3 stars. And by my count, they got 19 first-round picks among them, 8 for SGA, 6 for Jalen Williams, 5 for Chet. Now we go down to the role players. So among the role players, I think there are 2 that could feasibly net multiple first-round picks in a trade. And it's not just who they are as players, but it's the contract situation and their ages. So those 2 players are Kason Wallace and AJ Mitchell. AJ Mitchell obviously being the surprise, considering like he was just kind of a no-name rookie last year. Now you make the argument that like maybe he's the next Jalen Brunson. Maybe we're going a little bit too far with that, but I think out of the 29 other teams, you could probably find a few that are open to that as evaluation on him. Plus, you get 2 more years after this one, or I guess it would just be 2 years since it's the summer of 26, with him at like basically the minimum. You could use those 2 years to decline the last team option, make him restricted, and then re-sign him to a team friendly deal that way. Kason Wallace will be extension eligible after the season, but he'll still have a low cap number for next year, so you can trade him pretty easily to most teams. So, of these 2, I started with Kason Wallace. The team that I traded him to was the Milwaukee Bucks, under the logic that A, they now have this $100 million in dead money albatross to Damian Lillard hanging over their heads. B, they do have like pretty limited assets. They have those 2 in 31 and 33, those 2 first-round picks. We assume John Horst is going to fire those bullets at some point in an effort to keep Giannis. And the logic here would be, hey, Giannis, we just got a young version of Drew Holiday, and Miles Turner is our younger version of Brook Lopez. We can kind of recapture what our championship formula was in the past. So I had the 31 and 33 Bucks picks going to the Thunder for Kason Wallace, and then his matching salary would be like Kevin Porter Jr. and a minimum or something. Fair, foul, good, bad?
I think that would be this is the first one where I think the team trading for the player is definitely getting a discount on the guy. And part of it is the Buck situation. I'm just very high on Case and Wallace. I think right now, like his value in a way is stunned because he is like so low on the offensive hierarchy with the Thunder right now. But I feel like he can, when he scales up, if he were to play on a different team, or maybe like if they were to trade Dort, or like start him and really let him play a lot more minutes, I think Wallace might be worth a lot more in the future. So right now, yeah, that is probably what the Thunder could get for Case and Wallace. But what I mean by that's too low is that, like, I think it's just too early. Like in this liquidation project, if they had to go through some, fire sale, they might as well just hold on to Case on Wall. That's like the one guy I feel like out of everyone we're about to go through, where now the big three's gone. He's one of the leading guys. You got to hold on to him at that point. As far as what his actual value is now, yeah, that is probably what they could get for him at the highest end.
Well, do you agree that like I mean, nobody's really put this out there. There hasn't been any reporting. They're so good that nobody's talking about it. I kind of think Dort is going to be the one in the current team that probably isn't back next year, just because we know that Kason Wallace is ready for a bigger role, whereas we don't know that Thomas Sorber is ready to replace Hartenstein. So Dort and Hartenstein both have these team options. I think the one that's likelier to move is Dort of those two. Do you think that's fair?
Yes, but I don't think that's what they necessarily need to do. Like, let's say they keep only one first round pick out of the four that they have, and it's not going to be anything super high. That they find Kenrich Williams, so they'd be about like 20 million over the second apron. I think they start a little lower. Like if you're going to, if the goal is to get under the second apron, and keep in mind this isn't that big of a tax payment, 164 million relatively speaking nowadays. But let's say they do want to get below the second apron. I think you're starting with Joe and Wiggins because you already got AJ Mitchell. He's more of a facilitator than Joe, who is a pure shooter. But I think you can probably find, like, hopefully with your draft picks, like I think Mitchell can take those Joe minutes. Wiggins, maybe with those draft picks, you can find his replacement. Maybe you could move one of Topic or Sorber if they just figure those guys don't fit. Also, I'm looking at not necessarily this 26, 27, but to accommodate for Case and Wallace's big contract, then I think they would move Caruso maybe in 2027. So I think they're gonna like move up a little bit before they get into their top five guys. And of course, Dort and Hardenstein have those team options. Maybe they want to restructure their contracts. Maybe they can get them on a little bit of a discount for like a very long deal. I would imagine that if the Thunder win another championship, teams are probably going to be trying to pay them more just to like hurt the Thunder. So I guess it just depends how much money uh, these guys are going to get offered. In which case, okay, if maybe they can get a lot of value for one or two of these guys, then yeah, it's worth exploring. But if they can keep them, I think they try to go from the bottom up first because they could get below the second apron by moving some of these guys.
That's reasonable. I will say I hadn't really thought too hard about this, but Caruso is probably the one that if you are going to move him, it makes sense to do it sooner because of his age and because he plays fewer minutes. I think I don't know, but he's harder to fit onto teams than Dort is just because Dort's the more reliable shooter. I think they'll hear offers for all three of those guys and they'll just see, does somebody want to blow us away for one of them? Because I think Kason Wallace is like the fourth big salary that they're going to want to keep. I think there will be some cycling of the mid-tier salaries below the big three and wherever Wallace ends up. But those four, I think, are the ones they're absolutely keeping. So that's Kason Wallace. AJ Mitchell, it's a hard one to figure out trade wise because we don't know who those one or two or three teams out of the 29 would be that would look at him and say, man, he's so good as a bench player. What could he be if he was a starter? Because there are those teams, they will exist. We just don't know who they are. The team I came up with that made sense as a 2 first round bid for AJ Mitchell was Toronto. The reason for that, it's a few things. Number one, they're paying so much to Emmanuel quickly. They're overpaying him. That's just a reality. If you get AJ Mitchell playing the same position at basically the minimum for 2 years, you've kind of balanced out your point guard situation a fair bit, where now you're paying two very good point guards combined like good starter money, and you're happy to do that. The way Toronto is winning, it's also like the starters are individually all playing pretty well, but the starters as a five-man unit are not. They're winning these games with their bench minutes. So my thought here is you start AJ Mitchell and then you move quickly back to the bench where he was so good in New York. And A, that maybe improves the starting lineup, but B, it makes the bench even more of a strength. And now you can be a team that like really, really wins, not just with depth, but like you have a better starting five, but you also have this killer depth in an era where like that's more valuable than ever. We saw Indiana and Oklahoma City both make the finals last year playing 10, 11 guys frequently. They control all of their own first round picks, and they are a little aimless. They kind of need that big swing for somebody with star upside. It's wild for me to say that AJ Mitchell, of all people, might be that person. But like, if you look at him and say we think he has a Jalen Brunson-esque jump in him, then go for it. Trade your 27 and 29 picks. You figure you'll be okay in those years. So those aren't going to be crazy, like this pick comes back to bite us. It's unprotected. It comes in at number one. Of the, like, again, AJ Mitchell's the hardest to trade because you're working with the least information here.
Yeah.
Is Toronto a team that makes sense, like following this line of logic?
I think they make sense. I just have not gone there as far as thinking. I haven't really thought about what exactly AJ Mitchell's value is. I think right now, 2 first round picks is too much given the small sample size. But I do think Toronto does make a lot of sense. Can they? I think the more realistic offer right now might just be one of those 1st round picks. Um, Maybe the Raptors try to get him for their 26, which probably wouldn't be that valuable. It's hard to say. I feel like that's a lot of value for him right now, and I think I just would want to see just a little bit more. I'm not doubting that he's not going to sustain this, but that's just like just like a very high valuation right now. Yeah, I'd have to see a little bit more, but at the same time, he is making just under $3 million a year. 2 more years after this one, so there is a lot of value in that. I think he is. He could be a lead guard in the. Yeah, he probably would be the starting point guard for Toronto right now. I don't know. I just think that's quite a bit of value right now. That'd be great if the
I think
OKC could actually do that.
the thing to remember is we're doing this in the 26 offseason. So we'll have had the rest of this year and the playoffs to evaluate. So if Oklahoma City wins another title and AJ Mitchell is really good in the playoff run, then it becomes a little bit easier to talk yourself into like, okay, there's real Jalen Brunson potential. Nobody was trading 2 first round picks for Jalen Brunson in 2020 or 21, right? But by 2023, that would have looked like a steal. That is the idea here. Although I understand that like the Jalen Brunson situation is kind of a once in a lifetime thing. I wouldn't bet on AJ Mitchell becoming Jalen Brunson. That's just kind of the popular conception of AJ Mitchell's value. We
Yeah.
have 5 players left that I think are worth 1 first round pick. I'll go through all of them and I'll give you the trades just rapid fire order. Just tell me what you think as a whole afterward. Alex Caruso. Let's get the coming home montage going because he's going back to the Lakers for their 2031 first-round pick, Jared Vanderbilt and Dalton Connect. This was kind of Sam Quinn fan fiction. It would just make me very happy to get him back to the Lakers. It was a travesty when he left. He obviously very much fits the need for them. They badly need perimeter defense. LeBron would be so happy. The fans would be so happy. It would be great. Isaiah
That'd be
Hartenstein.
yeah. That'd be great for
If
the
you
Thunder more, I think. Because well, what's your prediction on Caruso's window at this level?
he plays so few minutes that it actually might be pretty extended, right? Like if he was playing on a normal team and playing 28 to 30 minutes like most teams would use him for, I'd be very, very nervous about his decline. But like if the Thunder could just play him 16, 18 minutes a night and like skip back to backs and like, oh no, I twisted my ankle. I guess I'm out for 6 weeks now. Like the Thunder specifically can extend his window longer, and that's probably going to lead to a bad trade at some point, by the way. Like, isn't that where this is going? Where Caruso is going to be essential to another championship run, maybe 2, and then they're going to trade him while he still is like Alex Caruso. And then the normal team that gets the version of him that's like 33 and playing normal minutes, he's gonna fall off from there, and it's like, oh no, what a terrible trade. Like that's what I think is
Yeah.
gonna happen.
I just don't know if with that contract he has that type of positive value. Now, granted, you did have some bad money heading back to the Thunder to help with that, but it's so interesting when Caruso signed that extension almost a year ago now. It's like he's getting such a high percentage of the salary cap for so few minutes played, and that was baked in with the contract. They're paying him a lot of money to play like no more than 20 minutes a night and just be healthy for the playoffs because he's going to be closing a lot of games. It's almost like kind of like a I don't know if I'm trying to think in baseball. I'm not because I don't really follow baseball. It's kind of like a reliever, I guess, in a way. You're having a certain guy close. You're choosing when to close him, when to have him close certain games. Even though he doesn't play every day, it's not one-to-one comparison, but it feels kind of like that. I don't know. I have to think about the teams. I don't know if the Lakers do that deal, but it's hard. It's really tough to see how valuable that is to other teams right now, because right now it's very valuable for the Thunder, especially with that contract. Not sure it's that valuable elsewhere.
Do you feel better about that trade for the Lakers if it's their 2026 pick, like the Thunder tell them who to pick
Yeah,
instead of the 31 pick? Then
absolutely.
I think that makes sense because Caruso just makes the most sense for a win now team. The Lakers
Yeah.
being an obvious example of somebody that knows him very, very well. Isaiah Hartenstein's a little harder because centers just it's there's more good centers than there are minutes for centers right now, or at least at the starting level. I came up with New Orleans because they do need kind of a defender rebounder type
Yes.
next to Derek Queen. And I think Zion is frankly going to be gone because Derek Queen has been very, very good. So we're shuffling Zion out. And the way we're doing this is New Orleans 2028 pick. Don't worry, Pelicans fans. I top four protected it, along with the DeJounte Murray contract, which they'd be getting out of for Hartenstein. And the idea there would be we'll be bad in 27. We'll get our pick, which we still own. And we also have that Bucks pick, which maybe the Bucks trade Giannis. So that could be potentially very valuable. I think they get it if it's in the top four, right?
If which pick?
The 27 Bucks pick. The Hawks get it if it's outside the
Oh,
top four, and the Pelicans
yeah.
get it if it's in. So they'll have a high pick in 27 one way or
Yeah.
another. And then the idea would be Fears and Queen will be better, and Murray will be gone, so maybe we'll have spent a little bit of money. And like we'll try to be good in the 27-28 season with
Yeah.
Hartenstein as our center next to Queen. So good.
I think this trade actually makes a lot of sense, even in the real life terms. I could see if Hardenstein does become available, with the Thunder looking to trade save a lot of money. They fear they can't afford him long term. I think that's a very realistic trade. Not the Dejounte Murray part, but sending him to the Pelicans. I think that's such a great fit. Them trying to be good now. Uh, I think that would help them get a lot more uh, to like not like a playoff level team, but maybe get closer to the play-in level that they've been the past few years because they just need a big man who can rebound really well. Hardenstein's one of the best rebounders in the league right now, and just also play at an all defense level to carry a just horrible defensive personnel on the Pelicans. I like this one so far. This one I like the most.
Lou Dort, you could kind of just throw a dart and where whatever team it hits, he would fit on. So I came up with Charlotte for Josh Green and for Miami's 2027 pick, which is lottery protected but becomes unprotected in 28. There are a dozen teams you could throw out for Lou Dort. Like this is one of many. Charlotte very badly needs some perimeter defense. So I don't know, like, is there a specific Lou Dort team that stands out to you? Because I think we've talked about this. There is a chance that he gets traded in the next year or two just for salary concerns. So I imagine there will be no shortage of interest. Lou Dort will get a first round pick from a number of teams.
Yeah, and I could see him in maybe the Thunder are able to not take back bad money. Maybe they could even get like an additional first round pick. I feel like Lou Dort is like worth one good and one like decent protected first round pick. Because He's out of everyone, out of all non-stars, probably the easiest guy to plug in uh, on any team. So I would imagine it would be a huge bidding war for him, and maybe they can get like 2 firsts for him.
Yeah, I guess this is one of those situations where we might look at Dort and say the value is like 1.5 firsts, but that means that among the 29 teams, there is one that's going to say 2 good firsts or 1 good first and 1 bad first. So I think he's the easiest guy to trade. It's just the 3 and D skill set fits so easily onto any team. It's going to be about like who has money that Oklahoma City would want to take back and who has a pick that they're particularly optimistic about. The last 2 guys, I think, are the ones where it's kind of a stretch that they could be traded for first rounders. I think I found teams that make a little bit of sense, but I'll understand if you want to push back. The first is Aaron Wiggins. I think the real benefit for Aaron Wiggins is the contract, where even after this season, he'll have 3 years left at less than 26 million in total. That contract descends, and it's like not taxpayer mid-level money, but like cap room mid-level exception money. Just bonkers cheap for somebody who can give you 25 good minutes a night. The team that I looked at was Indiana because we've talked about this a lot. They might not want to pay whatever Benedict Mathurin wants. He's kind of the guy who's always fit kind of strangely onto their team. He might look at himself as like a number 1, number 2 option on a better team. He's going to want to get paid like that. If the Pacers just say, no, we're not going to do that, we can't afford to fit that into our salary structure, maybe you trade him, you sign and trade him at this deadline, and then you trade for Aaron Wiggins as a replacement. And then the idea would be you trade your 27 pick, lottery protected, so the pick next year when Halliburton's back, to bring him in basically to fill the Mathurin role. And then you still have your own 26 pick to like make your upside swing. Fair deal?
I don't think Wiggins is worth the first. And the next guy you're going to touch on, Isaiah Joe, I don't think so either. Now, I do want to talk about them just because, as I alluded to, with the potential that the Thunder might want to save some money next year to at least get below the second apron. I could see those guys being the players that they look to move to get some type of positive value, but also assuming they already got their replacement in line or have him coming in the same deal. So we know what the Thunder's blueprint. The past like 2 years ago, they traded a first round pick to help the Clippers get an extra first round pick to trade for Harden. So now the Thunder have a 2027 swap that like trading a first round pick for a swap seemed like what well, like that's like a lot of to give up for a swap, and that ended up paying out. It looks like that should pay off really well. They did it again, helping the Mavs to get Daniel Gaffer, traded a crappy first, and now they'll have the Mavs 2028 swap. So I could see maybe instead of getting a first round pick, which I at this point I think if you're the Thunder, you have already gotten so many first round picks for SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren. Can you get some swaps now? And in real life, I could see them trying to do that. Can you get a team interested enough to take them on and just trade a swap and get like a distant swap in the future to help them draft higher, maybe the 2030s forward? That's probably a bit much value too for these guys, but it's probably a little more attainable for other teams if that instead of trading an actual first round pick.
I think you're being realistic. That wasn't what this exercise was
Yeah.
because I wanted to come up with a number of like the Thunder are worth this many first round picks. So
Yeah.
doing it for swaps just wasn't as exciting, but I do think you're ultimately right that that is probably more what they would seek. I think with these guys, they're worth like late protected first round picks where they're the finishing piece for a good team that's thinking, we're getting an eighth or a ninth man that we really like that checks a box for us, and we're paying him at like a fair, maybe even team friendly contract amount for the next several years. You're paying for the cost certainty, I think, with these guys, especially Wiggins, getting those 3 cheap years for like somebody who not only has already been a good bench player for a champion, but somebody with some upside to do some more, I think, on a different team. Isaiah Joe is the hardest of these guys because you don't really see that archetype get traded first round picks anymore. I went back and I looked, and like the closest I could find to just 3-point shooter getting traded for first round pick was Kevin Herter to Sacramento. And Kevin Herter had been a starter and he'd been deep in the playoffs and he could do more on the ball than, Joe has shown. So there're just not that many examples of teams trading a first round pick for Joe. Just to kind of round this out, I threw in Utah. They have that 2027 Lakers pick that right now looks like it's going to be number 25 or something, just not very valuable. With the idea that the Jazz take a billion threes, but they don't really make any of them. So it might help their development, might help them take the next step towards being competitive. To just have another sharpshooter on the roster, obviously a very easy contract to fit in. They'd have cap space, so they wouldn't have to bother sending anybody back. So Isaiah Joe to Utah for that Laker pick. Again, you think that's probably too much?
It reminds me of when the Hornets in 2016 had a extra late first round pick and they traded it to the Kings for Marco Bellinelli. I think Joe's better than Bellinelli was at that time, but kind of feels like the same way where, okay, we this team doesn't want to, they're trying to get a little better. They're probably not quite ready. Who'd you trade him to? The Bulls? Is that what it
I
was?
had him going to
The
Utah.
Jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I don't think the Jazz would be that type of team, but because and like I guess it depends on how their shooting situation is because it's and how much their surplus is because they don't really have any shooters. So I understand the like if they are ready to make a step and they have so many extra first round picks, okay, it's not unreasonable. I just don't think they'd be the team to trade that type of value for a role player.
So as we've now gone through the, I believe, 10 total players that I have traded, I think where we've fallen is that you think the valuation overall is probably slightly lower than I do. Like there were a couple of players where you thought probably worth not quite as much as I thought, maybe not worth the first round pick, not worth multiple, maybe only worth one. I think Cason Wallace was the only one that you thought was maybe worth more. So do you think it's
Yeah,
fair to say like your valuation overall is probably slightly lower than mine?
a little bit, but not by too much. Like maybe a 3 or 4 first round picks.
Okay, so my
Yeah.
valuation in total had the Thunder trading these 10 players for 28 total first round picks. As we covered at the top, the Thunder have as many as 14 picks in these next 8 drafts. This would give the Thunder 42 picks over the next 8 drafts. It's a little bit more than an average of 5 per draft if they did this, including in the year 2027, the Thunder could hypothetically have 10 of the 30 first round picks in that entire draft. Of course, you're not actually going to do this. And like you mentioned, I think if the Thunder even, they'd never go down this rabbit hole, but like they'd start trading for swaps and they'd start
Yeah.
trading for players. It wouldn't really be a quantity thing. But we talked about your old net value writing stories that you used to write for Hoops Hype. What I've come to here is that the Thunder have a net value of almost 42 first round picks. Do you ever remember a team coming that close to that? Like
Oh, I'd have to look at my research. But I think it was the Thunder. I think the Thunder was always a team with the most first round picks worth the value.
I can't imagine any team coming close to 42 first round picks worth of
Yeah.
value over the next 8 drafts. Like that, the one team I could maybe see, there might have been a moment where the Celtics had Tatum and Brown and Kyrie and all of those other future first round picks. Maybe the Celtics at that point would be the only other team. Or if you went far enough back and you're like, what if the Lakers broke up the 1985 team and it's like trading Magic for a million picks? And back then there's no Stepien rule, so you could just trade for all of them. And James Worthy and Kareem and blah, blah, blah. Like it is a very short list of teams that have ever had this much. And even if, it's unrealistic, the Thunder aren't actually going to liquidate all their players. I do think it's a worthwhile exercise to kind of see just how much this team really
Yeah.
has because it's a historic amount.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't I hope that there are other people out there listening to this that could come up with some other methodologies to figure out this because it's really unprecedented that like a team is this good and has this much wealth and it hasn't really been quantified. Even the Warriors from 10 years ago, they never had a big surplus of first round picks. Even if they traded Curry, KD, Clay Thompson, Are they getting even like half the value of this? Because the rest of those guys, like Draymond, okay, he probably had like a good amount of value at his peak, but it ultimately had more value to the Warrior. And then they didn't really have anyone else like that had really that much value. Like Iguodala had like a little bit of value, and then that's it. They didn't have any extra guys on rookie contracts that probably could have netted them like a lot of value. So no, this is it's like pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, the issue you would have run into as Golden State is sort of what we were dealing with up top. There just aren't that many teams that have enough to trade for guys that good, where you might have said Stephen Curry in 2017 is worth 10 first round picks. Who has 10 first round picks? Nobody, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're ultimately you have to take less than the guy is probably worth. So that's why it has to be a team like the Thunder that has all of this pre-existing draft surplus, but could then trade all of their other players and their value is kind of spread out, where you do have these stars at the top that are worth a million picks on their own, but you also have role players you could trade for one first round pick, where the Warriors didn't really have that, right? Like they had Iguodala, but beyond that, they weren't going to trade like Sean Livingston for one first round pick. That trade wasn't out there. What's so special about the Thunder is they kind of have everything, where they have a draft surplus independent on its own. They have stars that are worth a million picks on their own. But then you go down the entire roster, and all of those guys are worth first round picks too. So we don't keep needing
Yeah.
to beat this dead horse. This is
Maybe
the
the
most
Warriors
value.
maybe the Warriors could have gotten at least 10 first round picks of value for Curry if they traded him to the Celtics. Gotten like 5 first round picks plus one of Kyrie or Jalen Brown, uh, plus some of the other guys on rookie contracts like Terry Rozier, who who had like a decent amount of value at the time. There's a couple other players I'm missing on, but they had like they were so they had those extra young players as well as the draft picks.
The trade that Brooklyn made with Phoenix, where you're not only getting all of those picks, but you're getting all those players, the Warriors would have had to have made three of those trades. Could they have found three of those trades? I don't know. I'd have to go back and check. I find it unlikely. So yeah, I think we've beaten this dead horse enough. The Thunder have more than any team has ever really had. That feels like a good place to wrap. Yossi, it's Thanksgiving weekend. I don't think I have anything too pertinent coming up to write. I hope that you're just going to relax and have a nice, fun weekend. So nothing really to plug, but read Third Apron as always and read CBS Sports as always. Yossi, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for you joining this podcast. It's been an amazing first couple of months. I've been so energized getting to chat with you twice, 3 times a week. And yeah, so to whoever's listening, we both might kind of take the rest of the week off. We'll see unless something crazy happens. But we'll be back into it full speed ahead for sure starting next week. Yeah, thanks for hosting this one, Sam, and we'll see you guys next time.